come and see us today, and it's a little known library, so it's a good one to come and explore and find out a bit more about it. James is going to start by telling you a bit about our history.
We opened in 1839, which was only about 4 years after Melbourne was founded. It was, I think, the first building in Collins Street to go up, and very lucky to get it because the committee was so large at the time that when the land purchase happened, that they could go round and tell everyone else not to bid on the first lot of the land sale of Crown Land in Melbourne. So nobody did, and we got the land very cheap, which the governor in Sydney wasn't overly happy about, so they changed the law to make sure that couldn't happen again. Then resold some of the land up towards Little Collins Street, which gave the committee enough money to start building the library and everything else that's here. So right from the start, there were some very important people involved. The first president of the Melbourne Athenaeum was Lonsdale, and the first patron was Governor Latrobe. And on the one of the founding members was Redmond Barry, who you probably heard about having a major part in the founding of the State Library, or the Melbourne Public Library back then as well. We also had Marcus Clarke, who was a committee member, known for writing for the term of his natural life. And that was in the 70s, he was a committee member here, I believe. And Mark Twain also lectured here on his tour of Australia in the 1890s. The Athenaeum's not just a library. When it was founded as a mechanics institute, the purpose was much more than just borrowing books. It was the entertainment and education of the working classes. And as part of this, in 1840, so only a year after the library of the institution was founded, they started asking for donations and managed to put together a museum, which kept going until the late 1870s, which was about the time that the Melbourne Museum was founded, and a lot of the work that was going into the museum here was carried across to help with the founding of the public museum. In 1872, the name was changed from the Melbourne Mechanics Institution to the Melbourne Athenaeum, incorporated back then, or? Yeah. But the driving goals remained the same: to provide education and entertainment to the general population of Melbourne on a non-for-profit basis. And as well as the space we're in now, there was a theatre, which was at the time run entirely by the Melbourne Athenaeum, in the downstairs space where there is currently a theatre, and that was used for a lot of large meetings, including the Melbourne City Council used to meet in the Athenaeum building before the town hall was completed. And in the 1920s, that was redeveloped into the current theatre, and for a long time was used to screen both to screen film and all live shows. On the postcard you got, there's one that has 4 buildings. That's the various height stages. So when the building started in 1940, it looked like the one in the top left corner. In the top right, that was when the And as well as the theatre downstairs, there's another space upstairs, which from 1910 until 1978 was used as an art gallery, and people such as Arthur Streeton and the other names escape me right now.
Lots of famous
Australian
artists.
both professional and amateur, exhibited in that space. And
So
then
it's really been the who's who of Melbourne history, art, culture, any kind of people involved in the arts or the literary field, or
Comes through here at some point.
Yeah.
have come through here. Yeah.
And we had, and because it was so well known, had a lot of firsts. We had the first electric light in Melbourne was turned on here, and it was it was not used to light the space. There were still gas lights for that, but it was a novelty over in the corner that people could see. We had the first feature-length film had its world premiere here with the story of the Kelly Gang in 1908, wasn't it?
Close.
Close.
It's around there.
Yeah, around there. And the Australian premiere of the first talking picture, so the jazz singer, in the 20s. Yeah.
Alright, so I'll tell you a little bit about the Melbourne Athenaeum organisation. So as James mentioned, this is the Melbourne Athenaeum Library. The organisation is actually called the Melbourne Athenaeum Incorporated, which oversees the whole building, not just the library. And it's that reason why we're still here and the whole library operation still works, is that we lease out different parts of the building, and that funding goes to keeping the library going. So members pay an annual subscription here, but that only goes to cover a very small amount of the library's expenditure. It's a not-for-profit organisation and heritage listed. We're run by a committee of management, which is 10 people who are made up of members of the organisation. They're all volunteers, and they meet about once a month to talk about the direction of the organisation and make sure everything's working. I'll tell you a little bit about the staff. There's a management group who look after the whole building. So there's the building manager, who's Sue Westwood. There's also an accountant and a bookkeeper, which look after all the figures. And also a marketing coordinator who does her best to get our name out there and try to curve the first line that people walk in and say, I never knew this was here. She's doing her best to try to change that. And the library is the main part of the organisation. It's a combination of paid staff and volunteers here. Typically we have 2 paid staff on at a time and 1 volunteer. There's not the funding to have a big staff. It's quite a modest budget, so we have to rely on volunteers, and we're very fortunate to have a great team. The staff are made up of an honorary librarian who acts as the library manager. That's a volunteer position, and her name is Rose Blaustein. She basically directs the library and makes sure we're on track and that sort of thing. My role here is as the library coordinator, so I work 5 days a week and basically look after the day-to-day operations of the organisation. James here works 3 days a week. He's the library's cataloguer, as well as looking after lots of different aspects, like the website,
social media,
a long list of
lots of
things.
stuff.
We have an acquisitions librarian who works 2 days a week, so they're the off days for James, so I've always got someone here to work with. There are Saturday casuals who work here too, so they're on rotation, and about 12 volunteers who very kindly give up their time to help us. And those volunteers are largely made up of retired librarians for the most part, so they have a lot of experience, a lot of skills that they can bring to the
My
library.
job when you guys get sick of me.
Yeah, people who love the industry and don't want to leave it, but don't want to continue working. So they tend to come here, which we're very lucky to have them. And like I said, we couldn't really operate without them. And
Well, the other side of the volunteers is we have a lot of library students who are using it as experience as they get their start in the industry, and in fact all the current staff started as volunteers. So we're very lucky to be able to draw our paid staff from that base.
they're already trained up, so
Yeah.
it works well. And we also take student placements, not too many, but throughout the year, so they help us do specific jobs that we're trying to get covered, and they also gain some experience at the same time. So that's basically our team. Another aspect of the library organisation is our archives department. They work in a separate room, which is above us, where all of our archives are kept and there's space for them to do work. That's entirely a volunteer group, so they do some great work, and again, very fortunate to have them working for us. Now, I'll get James to tell you a little bit about the library's collection.
So the main service that the library itself offers is the lending of books, and in our collection we have about 30,000 books, and that's split roughly evenly between fiction and non-fiction. Within the non-fiction, we have a very strong biography section, which in this area, so everything that's on that wall and in this final set of shelves is our general non-fiction. These ones with biography in the end, and everything that curves around here through the door is biography. In the fiction side of things, we have very strong collections in crime fiction and general fiction, and that changes based on what our members are interested in. Our collection development is driven very much by members. Because we're independent, there's no government body telling us that we have to have this in the collection or have that. It's based on the experience of the acquisitions librarian, which in the past has meant that we've ended up with collections that didn't necessarily reflect as closely as they could, as the collection librarian had a bias towards their own interests. But at the moment, our collections librarian is very good, and it's mainly driven by suggestions from members and what's generally popular in the bookshops and other libraries. To get the new books, there's a budget of about $30,000 for physical books and $7,000 for ebooks, which we currently run through the Overdrive platform. We switched that very recently because we were with EBL, who we found were moving away from what we wanted. They were much more into the academic library sector. So we weighed up the options and chose a new library management system. And Overdrive is used by a lot of public libraries as well.
It's also a much easier platform to use than EBL. We found that it was quite difficult to use the previous ebook system, and this is very straightforward.
And in order to help with that, we also have a number of tablets and e-readers that we can loan out to people, although most people do use their own. We have, of course, to keep getting $30,000 worth of books every year, we need to make space. So we do have to weed collection. Our weeding is less based on age than a lot of libraries. It's much more on usage, and we make sure not to try and delete early parts of the series if we're keeping later parts of the series. So we've got the entire collection, whereas a lot of public libraries just can't manage that. So that's something that a lot of our members really appreciate. But if a book has a particular historical significance or reference value or we just think it's worth having and would be difficult to replace if interest peaked in it again. We send it up to the Stacks, which is in with the archives area, and we focus very much on Australian titles for that. So we have a first edition of Eye of the Storm, is it, by Patrick White, up there, that we thought that was something that we should probably keep, and I think we've got a couple of, we've got a May Gibbs that's signed twice,
Yeah.
because she did 2 events here and wanted to give us something on both occasions. So
How many items do you have up in the stacks?
I think it's about
Maybe about 1,000.
Is everything you've got catalogued?
No. About 99% of the collection will be catalogued.
Yep.
So it's pretty complete. But
So
some
James,
of-
what are you doing?
keeping up with the new stuff that we get. So that the focus is always to make sure that the new stuff is at the best quality, and then if there's time to go back and do the stuff in stacks, that's definitely a much lower focus. Yeah, so we've got the way that we do that is through the Koha library management system, which is an open source library management system. We switched to that in 2011.
You guys use Koha, don't you? In your cataloguing subjects and in your library system subject.
Is that tall?
Or have you not got to it yet?
Okay.
Yep.
Well, Koha's fantastic. So
Yeah.
it's a good one to be playing with.
Yeah, well, we moved in 2011 because we were with one that was a proprietary, and we found that we found it difficult to use, and we were fed up with having no say in what was done. It was just pushed by what the marketing team at